The First World War transformed the situation in Palestine. The British and French fought the Ottoman Turks, who were allies of Germany. In 1917, to divert attention from the stalemate on the Western Front, the British invaded Palestine. The Arabs had been offered independence from the Turks if they supported the Allied war effort. Many Arabs rose in revolt. Slowly at first, then more rapidly, the Allies advanced from Egypt through Gaza into Palestine. The land that had seen countless armies come and go now witnessed the advance of a modern 20th century army. In December 1917, the British captured Jerusalem. General Allenby made a triumphant entry into the city, the first Christian conqueror since the Crusades. But the British had made other promises too. In November 1917, Foreign Secretary Balfour announced British government support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. This promise became known as the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration contained an important but apparently contradictory proviso that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine.
The Balfour Declaration that promised or committed the British government to facilitate the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine, irrespective of the second provision of it, that the indigenous population's civil and religious rights will be protected, that silly phrase that the British used, without identifying the indigenous population in terms of their national identity and culture, clearly was understood by the Palestinians and by the Arabs in general exactly as it turned out to be. That is, it is a promise on the part of the British government, in fact, to facilitate the establishment of a Jewish state.
In early 1918, the British military authorities allowed a Zionist commission to visit Palestine, led by Chaim Weizmann, who had helped negotiate the Balfour Declaration. The commission began to plan for the building of a Jewish homeland. The Palestinian Arabs, already suspicious about the designs of the Zionists, protested. To them, Zionism seemed to be bound up with British rule. At the end of the war, the Arabs turned to the British and the French. Sharif Faisal, the leader of the Arab revolt, whose armies had helped the Allies to defeat the Turks, went to meet the British generals in Damascus. The Arab peoples now looked to the Allies to act on the promises they had made in the war and to fulfill their side of the bargain. They hoped at last to achieve the independence that had been denied them by the Turks. But the Arab hopes were frustrated by a secret agreement reached during the course of the war, known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The British and the French had decided to carve up the whole region into their own spheres of influence. After the war, under the guise of League of Nations mandates, the French had the areas that became known as Lebanon and Syria. The British had the areas called Palestine, Transjordan, and Iraq. Faisal left the meeting in Damascus disappointed. None of his demands had been met by the Allies. The Arab revolt had been in vain. The Arabs were left in no doubt as to who was now in charge of the region. The terms of the mandate given to the British by the League of Nations were intended to encourage self-government, and elsewhere this happened. But in Palestine, the Balfour Declaration was enshrined in the terms of the mandate, committing Britain to securing the establishment of the Jewish national homeland in Palestine. The arrival of the first High Commissioner, Sir Herbert Samuel, was marked by protests amongst the Arabs. To the Palestinians, the mandate not only denied them the right to independence, but also legitimized the claims of another people to their land.
And when the mandate was imposed on Palestine, we call it a mandate, I mean, that's another euphemism, you know, for colonial control. I mean, the British imposed their colonial control in the wake of the actual military occupation of Palestine. And regardless of the promises they have made to the Arabs, let's forget about that. In the pursuit of the Sykes-Picot Agreement and all the agreements they have made with European powers, they obviously intended to divide the Arab world, to control it, distribute it between it and France, and to establish in Palestine the Jewish national homeland.
The history of the Palestinians was now bound up with British imperial policy. Their future was set on a course they neither wanted nor were consulted upon. The consequences were to be increasingly bitter.